heard about this En-ROADS thing at when my son was the head of the Coastland Nature Center in Washington, D.C. And it was a high point of my COP21 experience. I couldn't imagine how you could take all these variables and come out with something that made sense. And I'm so glad that Phil is here to share his expertise with us. As you'll soon find out, he's born in England. You'll find out because his accent will tell you. And he went to school in England. He worked in, and he has PhD degree from Hull. He worked at Eastman Kodak, and most recently he retired from W.L. Gore. And he's on loan tonight from the Citizens Climate Lobby, to whom we are very grateful for sharing him. So, Phil, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. So it's great to be here with you all. I'm going to share my screen. That one. Share. Do slideshow. And then that. Okay, so you can all see my screen, I hope.
Yep.
The introduction screen. So, as Peggy said, I'm Phil Smith. I am English. I'm what they call an En-ROADS Climate Ambassador, which I'll explain more in a little bit. And I'm the co-leader of the Citizens Climate Lobby Delaware chapter. One of the things they like us to do, Citizens Climate Lobby, is to come up with a climate story. You know, what is your climate story? And I usually say, I don't have one, but I actually do. And so starting at the bottom of this, I got a PhD in organic chemistry, working in liquid crystal polymers from the University of Hull. I worked in London for Kodak on some photographic display products and photographic paper that we all used to get our prints on, which has gone away now. Everyone gets digital photographs and very few people have photographic prints anymore. I then moved with Kodak to Rochester, New York. And I worked for Eastman Kodak for another 5 or 6 years. And I worked on display products. I worked on some liquid crystal displays there and enjoyed the different seasons that there were in Rochester. In 2006, I moved down to Delaware. So I came here to Delaware. I started working for Gore. I worked on a number of different businesses. I started with industrial products, looking at disk drive filtration, and then I worked on fabrics for the last 10 years that I was with them. And when I was in fabrics, I was doing a lot of things in trying to get fabrics to move to a more sustainable position, you know, getting out of some of the PCFE containing products, getting out of some of the things that are used in fluorinated products to where we need to be, and to actually save some of the resources that we were using were fairly wasteful. I've done my fair share of traveling around the world. I've been to most continents. You know, I was really proud when I was at Kodak that I had a product that traveled 10,000 miles before it even got into the customer's hands. And I was proud of that. I'm still fairly proud of it, but I look back and go, wouldn't it have been better not to have this product that traveled that far? Wouldn't it have been better not to waste those resources? And so that's where my journey kind of there. I started thinking, what do I want to do next? In my last couple of years at Gore, I was working on products that I thought we shouldn't necessarily be working on. And I also wanted to try and do some things to improve the environment. So I was talking to people saying, well, what can we do? And Gore's one of these places, I don't know if you all know it, but Gore's one of those places where it's like, you can take leadership and you can start things on your own. So I actually started a group. We tried to come up with a name, and I said anything but not the tree huggers. And so the group actually got called Not the Tree Huggers. But one of the things that we were doing, we were throwing away plastic bags inside of trash cans every night when even if they only had one item in, people would throw it away at night. We tried to work on getting electric vehicle chargers in the buildings, and we tried to stop using plastic knives and forks, paper plates and cups, which we were using a lot of. I think the thing was, in one plant in Gore, we were spending something like $10,000 a year on paper cups for coffee. So I got together a group of people and said, hey, I want to do this. We ended up with 10 or 15 people who started rallying together to try and do it. And now I got invited back to a picnic this year and I've done presentations like this to them. But they have EV chargers at every plant. Most of the plants are not using paper plates and plastic knives and forks. They have dishwashers. They use reusable mugs. They don't throw away plastic bags. So anybody can make a difference if you put your mind to it. While I was working at Gore, I also then joined Citizens Climate Lobby, which was a really good thing for me. I learned a lot about what Citizens Climate Lobby do, and I got lots of training. I got lots of information, and they basically allow you, and I'm happy to talk more about Citizens Climate Lobby that anybody wants to know, but they teach you how to lobby Congress, how to be an activist, how to arrange meetings, anything you want to do, you're actually given the opportunity to do that. So if you're interested in looking at more of that, we're very happy to have you in the Delaware chapter. One of the things I learned while I was in Citizens Climate Lobbies, I saw this En-ROADS model. And I think like Peggy, I was kind of blown away by the amount of information that can happen, and you can see change on the screen and see things making a real difference. So I actually became an ambassador. What does an ambassador mean from En-ROADS? So the other thing around why I'm interested in climate, let's start from this. So in this week's newspapers, I think most of you, when you actually introduced yourselves, said you were really interested in climate change. So I'm not trying to talk down, I'm just saying this is what I actually called today from this week's newspapers. You know, people are talking about breaching the planetary boundaries, and a lot of scientists are doing this. Flooding in Japan, there's flooding in England, there's flooding in Hungary. Most Americans have been affected by heat in the Midwest. And we have here, right? We've been affected by that. There's, decline of species. There's home sales in flood zones, and people are building houses when they know they're at risk. You assume they know they're at risk, but they buy the houses or build them anyway. Floods across 4 different continents. It's in Hungary, it's in England, it's in Japan, it's here. I think North Carolina had 19 inches of rain in one day recently. Places in Texas, people are planning condos on walls that are getting washed away. Insurers are moving away from wanting to insure properties. Methane's going up. And there's places further afield, right? So we were talking about Delaware, but there's places like Malawi. People who've had nothing to do with this industrial revolution are actually paying with their lives, right? A major hurricane could strike Florida this week. You all hear that they're coming up. They're growing faster and faster. 3 and 4 crop varieties have gone extinct. Outer Banks houses falling into the oceans. But today, right? And there's lots of things in the press, which is really good. And California sued ExxonMobil today, saying they lied about plastics being recyclable in a decades-long campaign of deception. So that's one of the things the oil industry does, is they want to put the blame on you and make you do something when they're a lot responsible for it and they can make the biggest difference. So the Yale, now it's going to be interactive. So this session, I'm going to take you through the model. One of the things is it's free for you to use. Everybody can download it. You can play around with it yourself. You don't have to have me to drive it. But I'll show you how to do that. So Yale have a climate communications program, what they call the 6 Americas. And they ask people, how do they feel about climate change? And the buckets you can choose is alarmed, concerned, cautious, disengaged, doubtful, and dismissive. How many people do you think fall into the alarmed, concerned, and cautious brackets around America in the study that was done in fall 2023? So you can enter your answers in the chat. I'll give you a couple of seconds. Everybody can have a vote. There's nobody's going to judge you. 50, okay, we have 50. 30. 5, let's see. You have no faith in Americans at this point and how they feel. 45, okay. 20. 75, okay. Kim's more positive about this. So, go back to here. This is the study, so closer to 75, right? So you wouldn't think about it from the people that you talk outside. You wouldn't believe that 75% of people are cautious to alarmed about climate change. One of the things is we don't talk about it very much. This is a tool that would actually allow you to have those conversations. So they also do a survey where they say is global warming happening? So they asked people in the fall of 2023, and this is what the country said. And you can see most of them are they're all above 50%, even in the places that you would think were probably fairly big deniers. The national average is actually 72%. And I can see you're all trying to squint down to see where Delaware is. Delaware's here. 73% of people in Delaware who responded to this survey, and I don't know all the details of how they did the survey, but 73% believe global warming is happening. Now, they don't all believe that it's human caused, but enough people are now believing global warming is happening. So I think you can see that's why it's becoming more prevalent in the press. So to quickly get into the model, so it was developed by Climate Interactive and the MIT Sustainability Initiative. This is what the model looks like. It's a cutting-edge simulation that uses the latest data. It doesn't develop data itself. It actually pulls it from other studies. So things like the IPCC, the UN Panel on Climate Change, the energy agencies, everybody who's producing data, they use all of that. And they pull it all together into one model. It will run on any laptop or PC. It doesn't run on a phone, unfortunately, and I don't think it runs on an iPad yet. They do have some mobile applications to try and do that, but it doesn't quite run there. It runs fast in real time. It does thousands of calculations every second. And basically what you can do, and you can see here on the trajectory we're on with everything that's happened, it's a global program. So this is if the whole world did this. If the whole world carries on as it is, we're likely to get to 3.3 degrees centigrade. These are all the policies down at the bottom, and we'll look at those in more detail. And you can see here, this is where CO2 emissions are going. So they're still going up. They're going to, I can't see the chat right now. I can. They're still going up. They're not going to peak for a while. And then this is the primary energy sources. So the bottom one is coal. So you can see it's just going to remain flat. The next one is oil in red. There's natural gas in blue. There's renewables in green. So renewables are rising, which is really good. You know, and we can thank people like Peggy who are out there campaigning for offshore wind and other things to get solar farms to increase renewables. Bioenergy is in the pink, and there's a very thin sliver of nuclear at the top, which is blue as well. And then new would be something that doesn't actually exist so far. So we'll get into details. We're going to actually start playing around with these levers down at the bottom to see what effect they have. But that's what the model looks like. And this is the temperature change by 2100. And I always thought that was a long time off, right? It's like, well, you know, I'm certainly not going to be around in 2100. And a lot of people I was talking to weren't going to be around in 2100. But a lot of your, you know, children being born today are going to be around in 2100. So this is really real and really now, right? They'll be in our positions. but they'll be around by 2100. So this is actually really on the horizon. En-ROADS has been given so far. This was data from, I think it was probably August, to something like 270,000 people. There's 2,700 facilitators like myself. It's been done in 149 countries. We've had over 9,000 events. After this event, I'll actually register it, so that the numbers will go up tonight, and the Delaware number will go up as well. It's been done to regular people. It's been done to politicians. It's being done to business leaders. I think there's something like 700 of us climate ambassadors who do presentations, but you could learn it yourself and you could do these presentations on your own, and you could count those. So here's the baseline scenario showing the temperature change between the year 2000 going up to 2100. You can see we're going to get to about 3.3 degrees C in the baseline scenario. Does anybody know the temperature that we're supposed to remain below, that was set, that all the countries agreed to in the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015? Answer in chat. Okay, we have 1.5. Anyone else? 2. Okay, so it was 2 degrees, and preferably, it was well below 2 degrees and preferably below 1.5. So you can see if we carry on as we are, we're going to be double the 1.5, which is not what we want to do. Even if we stay at 2 degrees C, things like this are going to happen. And there are references for all of these, but the risk of river flooding doubles. 90% of coral reefs are going to be bleached, 4 months longer droughts, and 50% of the world's population exposed to lethal heat for over 20 days. So that's not going to be a great thing, even if we stay to less than 2. So I'm going to give you the punchline. We can get there, right? We can do this. The question is how, and that's what hopefully I'm going to show you tonight. As we think about this, when you think about the actions, and we're not going to have time necessarily to do it, but also think about the co-benefits that you get from a proposal. So one example, right? If you plant a tree, you plant trees to take up the carbon dioxide and hold the carbon in the ground and sequester that carbon. That's great. But trees also provide shade, so they allow the land underneath to be cooler. They provide areas for biodiversity, so they allow plants and animals to grow around them and in them. And people do really well when they're in nature, right? So we walk around nature, we feel better. That's one of the solutions that people have of getting people out into nature is going to make them feel better. But there's also other equity considerations. So some of those things that you could do could actually cause harm. Right, so some of the places where you need to plant lots and lots of trees, and I'm going to pick on trees as an example for a lot of these things, but if you planted lots and lots of trees, you're going to end up planting lots and lots of trees on land that people want to farm, right? So indigenous farmers want to farm, but we want to plant the trees, right? So there's going to be this fight. So people could lose the farmland, people could lose their opportunity to make money, they could lose the opportunity to feed themselves. So you have to think through that of what are the harms that could come with that policy as well. So back to the model, and we're going to get into being active in a minute. So one of the things you can actually do is, this is the same policy levers at the bottom, but you can see here, so if you get to coal, you can tax it, you can reduce subsidies, and one of the co-benefits is you reduce air pollution. Things like that. Oil, you can have less subsidies. There's pipelines, there's divestment, there's things to do, lots of wasted things. Natural gas, so we can come back to this, and I will share this presentation so you can have it in your hands to look at it in more detail. Electric vehicles, right? There's electric vehicles that will do good things. There's also where we're going with battery technology. There's also the downsides of, well, what's happening with charging infrastructure, is it there? And also what's happening to like the mining and things like that, the exploitation of people to actually get the minerals out of the earth. If you think to, protecting forests and deforestation, so you can look at the details of that. So these are all the impacts that are in the model that we could investigate. So you can look at temperature change, CO2 concentration, methane. Write in the chat things that you'd be really interested in looking at while I'm talking through this. So air pollution, the frequency of extreme heat, crop yield reductions, additional deaths from extreme heat, sea level rise, flood risks, ocean acidification, Arctic ice-free summers, arid land expansion from warming, and species losing their climatic range. So anything you particularly want to look at? We've got sea level rise. Okay. And we have extreme heat. Trauma faced by women. Okay, that's really interesting, actually. I heard there's not as much in here, but I can talk about that and climatic range. Okay. One of the things I actually heard yesterday in a podcast was that 39% of young girls in Bangladesh, there's been a 39% increase in girls under 14 being married off in Bangladesh because of climate change. So, okay, I'm still writing. Methane production and air pollution. All right, good. So there's lots of young girls being married off because the families need the dowries and the support from the families of marrying them off, right? So that's as a consequence of climate change. So these are the actions that you can choose, right? So we went through some of those. Are there any of these that you would like to investigate particularly? So on the left-hand side, we have energy supply. So getting energy from coal, oil, gas, bioenergy, renewables, nuclear, price on carbon. We can look at electric vehicles. We can look at energy efficiency of transportation, which would be a lot of building walkable communities and people using public transport. Things we do about electrifying buildings, like moving away from gas-powered furnaces to heat pumps. Okay, so we have coal, oil, and gas. And I might not do these in the right order, but I'm just taking some ideas so that I can choose. Oh, I steer away from population, but okay, let's see, we can look at that one. Buildings and industry, okay. Okay, that's a good start. So, if you go to agriculture emissions, okay. If you go to climateinteractive.org, and I will send you the link. I'll actually send you this very link. Well, I'm going to wait because I do this and then people cheat. So you go there, you get to En-ROADS, you click on the center button in the middle, and then you do explore the En-ROADS simulator. And you can see here it was updated in September 2024. You just close that, and then this is the model that you've seen before. So what we have, because one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is to download this and do it yourselves after we've finished. So if you go to help, if you hit this related examples, that's when it takes you back to that little slide showing you what's involved in each of these little buttons. And you just hit the X for it to go away. Go to help again. If you want to know, and you guys probably don't, but if you want to look at all the technical references, all the equations, all the things that are in here, it tells you about them, it tells you the details. You can still see this screen, right? Can I have a thumbs up, Peggy, if you can see what I'm going to? Good, thanks, Letty. So you can find out all the background of where it is, all the references are there because it's a very scientific program. If, for example, you wanted to know about Okay, we'll come back to that, Peggy, right? So if I go to agricultural emissions, I don't even know where trees have gone right now. Oh, nature-based solutions. So if I go here, so I'm going to talk about trees right now. So if I go to nature-based solutions and I click on that, it changes to the nature-based carbon dioxide removal. If I wanted to know more about it, I can click on this little I for information, which is help. It will tell you, landowners, public transport for large-scale tree planting, what's involved in agriculture, what the messages are, what the dynamics are. So it'll tell you all of that information. If I go to related graphs, it will actually show you these are the graphs that are affected by it. So if we go to land for farming, I can see that. So right now, if I move this slider, so you can see it's here, this is where we are today, the status quo. If I move it all the way to the right-hand side, so I'm going to plant as many trees as all the models in the world say we should plant, right? So you've probably heard somebody say we should plant 1 trillion trees. That is not realistic. You can't actually plant 1 trillion trees, but this is like as many as all the models say. So one of the things I want you to start doing is to think, what's going to happen when I move this slider? So this is now where you all get to interact again. I'm going to move the slider as far away to the right as it is, and you have no idea of knowing how big this effect is, so there's no wrong answers at this point. But what is that effect going to have on this 3.3 degrees centigrade temperature here? Right, so it's at 3.3. If I plant as many trees as are humanly possible by the model, what do you think this temperature is going to go down to? Answers in the chat. Lower it by 1 degree C, drop it to 3.0. Reduce by half, so that's 2.8, 3.2, 3.1. Okay, so here we go, drum roll. We move it all the way, 3.0. So we had one, Kim. Kim's done her homework, I think, because this is a couple of questions she's been spot on. So we get to 3.0, right? So you've heard people say, plant 1 trillion trees, it's going to be great. Well, it'll get you to 3.0 degrees, not 3.3 degrees. If I click on, again, on the heading there, and I go to the land for farming with CO2 removal, is here. And you can see that the amount of trees it is close to the area of India. And that's not actually that many trees that we're going to plant. If you wanted to change any of the assumptions, you guys probably won't want to do, but you can actually do detailed settings here. And now I can go into these, I can actually click on this, I can change the year we want to start. I can change all of this information here. So the percent of land for, we increase the amount of land, we get to 3.1. And the land for CO2 removal. So before we did that, right? We put all the things, we can put the amount of time. They changed this, I don't know how to do the thing, so. But if we do that, we go to 100% of what we do for the nature-based carbon removal. This is the amount of trees that we're going to plant. This is the area of India. So the landmass of India is here. So it's 2.5 India's worth of trees is the amount we're going to plant to get down to 3.0 degrees. So what are all those people who live on the area of India going to do, or 3 Indias? Right? So it's a massive amount of things that are going to happen. And it doesn't make that much difference in terms of temperature. Any Was that clear? Any questions that you have in the chat? I'll show you another couple of examples too, based on what we wanted to talk about. And then, so if I reset that, so I can click the little reset button here. Oh, the other thing to point out, the black line, the blue line is the current scenario. No, the black line is the baseline, and the blue line is the one that we've moved to. So that's what happens when you plant all those trees. Doesn't have a real big difference on the primary energy sources, but it gets you to 3.0 degrees. If I click on this little reset policies assumptions, I go back to the start. So the other thing that you wanted to look at was coal, oil, and gas. Okay. So if here we are on coal. So we'll do them one at a time. If that comes at the end, let's see, I can't tell you right now. So if I do this and we tax coal, if I tax it as far down as we're gonna go, answers in the chat of what temperature you think we're gonna get down to.
Phil, would you say that again? What will you do to coal?
Tax it.
Tax
So
it.
here, so you discourage mining coal, you discourage burning it. It's a really bad fossil fuel, right? Because it's really dirty. So you get a lot of air pollution. So it'll have good health impacts. It's used in a lot of places. It's cheap. It's fairly easy to get, but it's one of the worst things that we can do. So I'll reduce the subsidies, and we'll tax it. So basically, we're trying to eliminate coal. And you can actually do it and say, we want the coal tax subsidy to stop. We want to reduce coal infrastructure. We want to do it now, and we're going to highly tax it. So if we do that and basically stop coal, and we accelerate coal plant reductions, because coal plants are built and they're going to be around for a long, long time, and so you want to accelerate getting them out of the circulation as fast as you can. So if we accelerate that, you can get down to 3.0 degrees. Okay, so Amy was right. Okay, so that's what happens if you do coal. You also, one of the things you wanted to look at was air pollution. So so here you can before we move on, let's see here, right? The coal is here. We're in 2024, right? So we're about here. We stop it, and there's a little tail. It takes time to get rid of the coal and get it out of the system, but it basically comes down to there is no coal. Tiny little bits, right? But there is no coal by 2050, really. Some of that place is taken by a little bit more oil, a little bit more gas. You can see that goes up, and a little bit more renewables. If I hit this button at the top, the little circular button that looks like a recycling symbol, saying replay last change, you'll actually watch what happens. You can actually see these things change in real time. So go up and down. You can see the coal goes down, the oil gets bigger, but we get to 3.0 degrees. If I click on global sources of primary energy, go to impacts, and then go to air pollution. So this is where we were going, right? We're at 2024. We stop coal, air pollution drops rapidly, right? So coal is really, really bad for air pollution. Drops rapidly and then levels out at a much, much lower level. So we've got a lot more healthy system to live in, particularly people around the coal power plants. Okay. We do the same for oil. So now let's add in oil. and I want to tax oil. I'm not going to tax it all the way, but I'm going to tax oil. What's that going to take me down to? Answers in the chat. And I'll come back to the nuclear one. So 2.9, 2.8, 2.8. Okay. So we move. Yep, I'll do in addition to coal. I'll leave coal where it was. And we'll move oil down. So it's very highly taxed till we get to 2.8. So you guys are getting good now. You know what's going to happen. So we do coal, we do oil. We get the air pollution. If we go back to that original graph of energy demand totals. So you can see here now the coal goes down, the oil also goes down a little bit, the gas goes up. And if we replay that, right, so this is now going to show you the oil on top of the coal. Oil goes down, gas goes up a little bit, and renewables stay the same. But actually what I think you wanted to do was have more renewables as well, right? Because that's what we're all trying to do. But it all depends on what's happening at the time, and gas is one of those things that can easily replace oil right now. So you have to really put a focus on more renewables. So let's go up with renewables. So how much do you think the temperature is going to change if I do renewables? In addition to the other two. I'm just going to do it while you're 2.6. 2.6. Okay, so we're 2.5, 2.6. So we'll do renewables. Didn't do anything. Now, one of the challenges with this, and if we replay the thing again, you can actually see renewables grow. So we did actually increase renewables. We reduced gas a little bit. As you get closer and closer to this 2 degrees, it gets harder and harder. So it was a good thing to do. Probably if we look at the primary energy from fossil fuels is coming down, so we're using less fossil fuel energy. Air pollution still coming down, so that's really, really good. We'll do some tax on gas as well. So when we tax gas, right, you can see now the energy from fossil fuels comes down more. Let's go to impacts, temperature. So this is the temperature graph. We'll show it again. Temperature comes down to now 2.7. So we're getting there. One of the other things before we move on to other things that we're doing, I'm going to reset them back to nothing. So this is the starting point. One of the things that we actually do at Citizens Climate Lobby is to lobby for a price on carbon, which actually says, as the carbon is taken out of the ground, so the people who mine coal, the people who drill for oil, the people who bring the gas out of the ground would actually pay a fee, a tax to the government. The government would collect that money, and so it would encourage people to move away from fossil fuels. There's an equity consideration with this, that all prices, so the people who have the tax would then pass it on to everybody else, so prices would go up. So we actually propose a dividend back to every American. So every American would get a dividend share, and every child would get a half dividend share. We proposed it to be paid back at the time or before it's actually paid out. More than 60% of the country will actually get more money back than they would in the prices going up. But if we do this in a price on carbon, I'm going to make it $100 a ton. What do you think is going to happen to the temperature? Any ideas, guesses? 2.5. Bear in mind we were at 2.7 when we did coal, oil, gas, renewables. 2.7. Okay. Do $100 a ton. 2.7. Right. So it's a really drastic way to do it. And if you look at this, you can see what happens. We put the price on carbon. Coal goes down. Oil kind of stays the same a little bit, goes down a bit. Gas goes down, renewables goes up. So that's what we want to do. The price on the social cost of carbon, which is what they've said pollution should actually be, is $250, which would be a lot of a tax to put in right now. But if you went to 250, you can get to 2.4 degrees. If you look at the revenue from that, just to show you how big it is, the revenue when you do this is $4.8 trillion, which would be there, right? And that's what we'd give back to people as a dividend. If we go back to 100, which is probably a more, still high, but it's kind of more realistic about where you would be. You're at here, which is a $2.5 trillion that would be collected from the fossil fuel producers. So it's a really powerful tool, and it's one policy that you need to implement, rather than trying to go after oil, coal, gas, and all those things at the same time. So electric vehicles is one of the things that we talked about. So did we do that? So electric vehicles, if we go to electrification here and say, okay, we're going to subsidize electric vehicles and charging infrastructure, which is a lot of what is included in the Inflation Reduction Act. What do you think is going to happen? So I've taken everything else out, so we're just in where we are today. Answers in the chat again. If I go as far as we can go, and this will be every country doing it. 3.1, 2.5, 3.2, 3.0. I thought electric vehicles were the solution to everything. 2.5, okay. 3.2 with a massive subsidy. You can see here, right now we're at 7% of the share. We'll go up to 66% by 2056. We get to 3.2. So it's really important though. One of the other things that you can see, I think, here is if you watch this oil, so oil's there, and because we electrify all the transport, you can see oil is going down. I think renewables gets wider, gas stays the same, coal stays the same because we don't have any coal-powered cars, but oil goes down, so that's a good thing. Peggy'd asked me before about energy efficiency, basically building more public transport, making walkable communities, things like that. If we make energy efficient transport, we can get to 3.1, right? So that has more effect than cars. So getting cars off the road, getting everybody using public transport, do that in conjunction with all the cars being electric, still doesn't make that much difference there. Let's go back to, what was the other thing we said we wanted to try? Buildings.
So Phil, you basically are saying that electric cars would be wildly expensive to put on the roads and would yield just 0.1,
They,
point
they,
1 degree,
they
right?
would be quite costly to the government to do, to make big subsidies like that. And they don't make the biggest impact.
Mhm.
Right. So we're going to get to the punchline fairly quickly right now, but they're not the solution to everything, right? The people that go electric vehicles are going to solve everything. No, they're not. And people can't afford them. Cars are expensive. Public transport will be better than electric cars and have a bigger impact. But that's a tough sell certainly in America today, right? It's hard to get around without your own transport. But
Well,
making walkable communities and things like that would be really important.
which
Bill?
heading is subsumed, under which heading is, what you call it, good planning, smart growth?
Yeah.
and-
It would be under basically under energy efficiency. So if you look here, hybrid cars, walkability, and public transport.
I see. Thank you.
So they're not called out exactly right, but it's one of those things that the best approximation. If we made walkable communities, that would come under energy efficiency.
So Phil,
Yeah.
could I ask about the baseline on this right-hand graph there? Because the 3.3, is that the increase since 2000? So-
Yes. Yes.
So in fact, we've already increased.
Right. We're already. If I look at if I took it to temperature. In 2020, so if you I'm basically just roll over the top of it, so I get where we are. We're at 1.3 above the industrial temperatures right now.
Out of the 3.3.
Yep.
Okay, all right. I wasn't quite sure where the baseline was.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't actually call that out, but yes, it's degrees above the pre-industrialization level, but we're at 1.3 right now. Which is why you'll hear a lot of scientists saying we're never going to be able to do it, right? So it's maybe unlikely we'll be able to do it without overshooting, but that doesn't mean we should give up. Energy efficiency of buildings, so trying to do things like insulation on its own has a big effect. Factory using better energy, using better industrial processes. So, and agriculture emissions is the other one we wanted to show. So let's go back to the start. In agriculture emissions, you can see here some of the things. I think it was Letty that asked this one, but methane and nitrous oxide from agriculture, so you can reduce those. Or you can go into the detail settings and then say, let's reduce livestock, let's reduce crops. This is assuming 30% of people's diets is going to be from animals by 2100. We can increase that, and we can decrease that. Less food waste. So basically, let's try and do that, right? So we'll do as much methane and nitrous oxide from livestock as we can. We went from 3.3 to 3.2. Good agricultural methods trying to get methane and nitrous oxide from crops. Get it down to 3.1. Starting year is this year, so we want to do that. Years to achieve it is currently at 30 years, but if we said we're going to be really, really quick, maybe 10 is not effective. 20 years? No. 10 years? Still at 3.1. You can see here the graph on the right-hand side is showing the energy, the methane from an energy production, which we're not touching. Agriculture is yellow and waste is brown, so we affected both of those slightly. If we all become vegan, 40% of us, the diet is vegan by 2100. Again, we're making differences. It doesn't make a lot of difference in the temperature. And if we get food waste, we can get to 3.2 if we reduce food waste.
You should drag the food from animals down to 0, I think. You increased us. You made us more meat eaters, right?
That's 40. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's do it that way. So there you go. So food from animals goes down, so you can get to 3.0. Thank you for that catch. So we wanted to look at the effects. So right now, you're probably all feeling very, very glum and saying, well, everything we do, it doesn't make a big difference. But let's put those things together. So we've got the agricultural emissions getting us to 3. We want to do nature-based solutions, so we'll plant some trees. We want to electrify vehicles. We want to do energy efficiency. We want to do building efficiency. We want to electrify our homes. We want to, I'm going to put a price on carbon. We'll tax some more coal. We'll go all the way because we hate coal. We'll do some more oil. We'll do some more natural gas. 1.7. We could do some carbon removal. That was the other thing that, you know, people say, oh, well, you can do carbon removal. Well, you've got to start reducing these emissions before you get to that. But if you do some carbon removal, get to 1.6, and if you reduce methane, which is in waste and leakage, I overshot. So I can get to 1.5, and if I stop some deforestation, right? So you can see I can get better than 1.4, and this isn't just being hopeful, right? There are ways to do all these things. We've not talked about things like zero carbon, which will be nuclear fusion, things that haven't been invented yet. They're going to take a long time to come through. We haven't touched nuclear. We could have a look at that. But you can get to 1.4 degrees. But what this does show you is there's no one solution, right? We need all the solutions. And one of the things that industry and the deniers who've now stopped being deniers, but they just say, oh, it's just too hard. And they'd rather have us fighting against each other saying, well, I'd rather have wind and I'd rather have electric vehicles. They want to pit the environmental groups against each other. And that's how we would lose. So we need everything. Everybody's things that they're working on counts. And we need it all to be successful. So if we looked at sea level rise, so again, I click in these little charts, I do impacts, and I do impacts, go across, so impacts in the atmosphere. So these are all the things I could look at. So we looked at air pollution, but we'll look at sea level rise flood risk. While that's coming up, so this is at the difference of getting to 1.4 degrees C from 3.3. So where are you interested in looking? First person in the chat wins. While we're doing that, I'll pull up on the other side the sea level rise numbers. So you can see currently, okay, Delaware. We'll pick, we'll pick, where was I? I was in Bethany Beach, so we'll pick Bethany Beach. So currently on the current path, we're about 1.7 meters of sea level rise. We can get down to about 0.5 meters of sea level rise if we get to 1.4 degrees. So sea level rise is still going to happen, but we can slow it down. So I look at Bethany Beach. And then if I click this button, I can do view larger. View larger. So this is Bethany Beach. The areas in blue is the land that is at risk. When we get to 1.4 degrees, well, it's at risk anyway. When we get to 1.4 degrees, the areas in green are the areas that we're going to save. So one of the things around this is very sad, right? And so it says you've got to be doing things to be really careful where you build, because there's going to be a lot of flooding around Bethany Beach, no matter what you do. Some of the areas in green are going to be saved. This is in 2100. You can say, well, what's it going to be like in 2050? So less, but still, if you've got a house in one of those areas, you're going to be worried about it. The other thing you can do, so if, in case you started feeling good, if you did 21st century with storm surge, so this is now 2050, I think the storm surge that they have had in Bethany is 1.5 meters. So when you have if a hurricane hits with a 1.5 meter storm surge, even in 2050, quite a lot of Bethany is going to be underwater. I think if you look at, we're going to fly away from Philadelphia Airport. That's not going to be there in 2050 either. So sea level rise is one of those really, really scary things. Extreme heat. I'm kind of running out of time, but if we look at impacts, frequency of extreme heat. So if we do this, be a lot larger. So there used to be on average 1 year out of 50 where there was an extreme heat event before 1900. Today, 8 years out of 50. And I think you're all going to agree, we've had a pretty hot year this year. So this year would actually count as an extreme heat year. So it would be years like this. They would happen 8 times out of 50. Well, they happen 8 times out of 50 right now. At 3.3 degrees, they will happen 29 out of 50 years. So basically, you say more than half the years are going to be as hot or hotter than we are right now. If we keep at 1.4, which is close to where we are, right, 8 years out of 50. So we can keep it only this hot, but you'll all agree this was a pretty hot year anyway. Trauma, again, impacts, additional heat, additional deaths from heat. So again, this is, go larger again. Right now, we're on track to 7.7% additional deaths in Southeast Asia, 2% additional deaths in North America. If we get to 1.4 degrees, we can keep that down at 0.6% in North America and 2.3% in Asia. So again, making a big difference. Not as big as we'd like it to be. It'd be lovely to get to below that, but being realistic, things are going to get worse than they are right now. Air pollution, we looked at air pollution before, but let's go. Air pollution from energy. So this is it. We have, with some of these policies we can get a rapid decrease in PM 2.5 emissions, which causes asthma, respiratory problems, especially for people who live by roadways and live by polluting plants. And climatic range was, I think, one of the ones you wanted to do. So impact. Species losing, a few larger. So species losing more than 50% of their climatic range. So it would be 50% of invertebrates is going to get down to 3. Vertebrates 25 to 2. Butterflies and moths from 38 to 1. So you can see things like this, right? It will make a big difference to keep it at a temperature that's similar to today's. So Peggy, the answer to that is probably no. She asked, are the sea level predictions including subsidence of the Atlantic coast? Because that's I don't know what's in the charts that are the graphs, the maps. Maybe the number is not, because it's a global average. But the maps may be because of Climate Central, but I can't exactly say that that's true. It probably is, knowing them, because the maps are produced by Climate Central, who do a lot of that flooding research. And methane. Don't know if we have methane as a... So people can just be aware of it. I think it's one of those, it's not... So the question is, how would DENREC use it? I think it makes awareness of some of those policies that make a real big difference. You can use it. So before I do this, I'm going to share this scenario. So I click this little share your scenario box here. I do copy the link. I can share it onto LinkedIn, Facebook, X. I can also share a link and put it in the chat. And so that is exactly what we have on the screen right now. So if you click that, you'll go there. It will take you to exactly the things that we've got right now and be a model that you can use. Say it'll work on your laptop, it'll work on a PC. How would DENREC use it? They'd look at it and say, what policies make sense, right? So I'd love people to look at this and say, carbon price is a really good way, rather than trying to tax coal, trying to tax oil, trying to tax natural gas. That's certainly how we're talking to our legislatures. See what different effects it has. You know, look at these things and say, we need an all of the above approach, right? There is no one solution that does everything. We need to do some EVs, some energy efficiency, some buildings, which is kind of what the process we're in right now is. So, is there anything else that people want to see in the model? I have a few slides after this to kind of wrap it up. But I think you probably understand enough right now. So don't be concerned. Really don't be concerned, right? So please take this as hope. And that's what some of my wrap-up slides are going to be, because it's available for you all to use. I would love it if you did. I'd love it if you want to go further and do more. I'm happy to come back and talk in more detail. One of the things here is the way that they explain it. So John Sturman is one of the people at MIT Sloan who actually developed this model in the first place. And if you consider the atmosphere like a bathtub, you have emissions coming in, and this is where my Englishness comes out because it's really difficult to use some of these words, but you have all the emissions coming in from the faucet, right? So the faucet's pouring CO2 in there. So all the fossil fuels that we burn is pouring those things in. And the drain is where you get in the removals. So that's why when people say, oh, we can just do carbon removal, we can do carbon capture and storage, you can't capture things fast enough. You've got to stop the emissions. So that's one of the reasons why when fossil fuel people say, oh, stop using coal and oil and all those things, and they try and put the blame back on you. They develop the carbon footprint model. They tell you that you should do this. They tell you should do recycling because that's going to solve everything. It's not. They have to stop digging it out of the ground. We have plenty that's there. We need things for a while, but we need to have a plan of how we get away from using fossil fuels by 2050, right? So that's what all the plans are in there for. And ideally, you want to have the removals faster than the emissions, which says then your bathtub is not going to overflow and we all fry. The levels are going to go down. But you've got to stop things going in, right? So that's what's really important. So hopefully I've shown you there's lots of things. There is no one solution, right? There's lots of different things that you can do and you need to do. You shouldn't feel guilty if you don't do any one of them, right? If that's not your thing, that's fine. And I would urge you not to argue with other people and go, oh, well, you know, we want to do this instead of that. It doesn't matter. Every bit counts. So recycling helps. Reducing things helps, right? Not buying things helps. Having an EV helps. The more we do, we actually influence the people around us. And the other thing, and the reason why I was so excited to get involved with Citizens Climate Lobby, getting to the politicians is one of the most important things to help us to get there. The other thing around this is we have to make the effort. Nothing I have shown you today is something that we don't know how to do. We have all the solutions. What we don't have is the political will and the personal will and the business will to make them happen. So that's why having conversations about these things and making people aware of it is really important. So I've got a few more slides. Yes?
Sorry.
No.
Have you talked to anyone in DENREC, or have you presented this to anyone in the legislature?
Yes. So yes, we've talked to some people in DENREC. And yes, I've talked to Stephanie Hansen about it. We've made the offer to do those things with them. We have, myself as a climate ambassador here, willing to talk to anyone who's interested. Getting more to the public. We also have 12 climate scholars at UD that we actually train to be ambassadors. So we're trying to go out to schools to talk to some of the students and give them the thing. We did presentations at the Youth Engineering Summit done by Plastic Free Delaware. So it's just getting the word out there. And Climate Interactive themselves have talked, we've talked to our Senator Coons Carper and Lisa Blunt Rochester. And Climate Interactive have actually done presentations to 40 members of Congress over the summer. So it's out there, we've done it, they've taken it to COPs, they have meetings every month that go through these things. So it's just, wherever we can, we're trying to talk about that. I do have a couple more slides, but just think about, how was it financed? So it's financed through MIT and Climate Interactive, and they're basically a non-profit. So they go out to people. Some of the things that they're doing right now is to actually try and get people to fund the model, so to fund the work that they're doing. I think they only have about 12 people. But, they're trying to get funding from people to actually develop pieces of the model that they want. So think about this and think about what you would actually like about being part of this 1.4 degrees C world. So I'm going to give you a minute while I have a drink of water. And you can put when you've thought of something, you can put it in the chat. So a minute's a long time when you're waiting, but do something. Okay. Conservation effort. What are these major takeaways? Yeah, so we can do the major takeaways thing. So was there anything that surprised you? Or do you have what was the key insight and what are you going to do now? So we have conservation effort, continue to recycle and reduce food waste. AI, right? So AI is a very energy intensive thing, and you probably all read the news that Microsoft's going to start up a nuclear reactor again to power their AI methods. Electric cars was a surprise, yeah. Some of those things that we talk about, people think is a big solution, and so that's one of those things that it's not that electric cars are not good, right? They make a big difference. but on their own, they don't make enough of a difference because other things can actually come in. And one of the things I didn't actually show you was there's a thing about energy efficiency. Why is energy efficiency so good? Because everything we do, we have more cars, we have more people, we have more things using electric. The amount of electric we need actually goes up. And so you have to be more energy efficient to actually get that to come down. And when you start getting that to come down is when the numbers make a real big difference. One of the challenges with there being so much in the model, it's hard to go through an hour and get everything that you want to talk about. But let me see if I can do this. So if I go to here and do energy consumption totals. If you look at this, energy consumption was going up and up and up and up and up. When we started to make a difference, we have to make them go down, right? So that's what we want, which is done by energy efficiency, right? If I get rid of that, I can make it go higher. That I can make it go higher too, right? So we could be in this world, but we want to be there. How significant, right? Surprised by the effect of carbon tax. That's one of the things. And so it's interesting, whenever you go to a presentation like this, there's always lots of CCL people and they're like, I'll raise the carbon price because it's such an effective policy. And I think that's why we're all there. Lots of people agree with it. It becomes a political challenge to do it. But we're one of 4 developed countries around the world that don't have a price on carbon. So that's why we keep pushing to do that. And how a significant sea level rise won't be avoided even with a good scenario. Yeah, that's the frightening thing. And a lot of the times when you end on sea level rise, people leave very despondent. So I want you to leave feeling encouraged, right? We can get to 1.4. There's nothing new, nothing outrageous, right? We haven't got nuclear fusion or anything else. This is all doable. We just have to choose to do it. So let me finish my slides and then, so it will be a real challenge. There's podcasts here that Michael Mann talked about, and in his book, he talks about this, that the biggest threat is not denial, but this despair and doomism. So people saying you can't do it. A lot of that is driven by the oil industry. And to be honest, a lot of that is driven by AI, right? So the words are out there. It just floods the zone with this thing of it's really, really bad. Only today, some of the scientists are saying, oh, we can't get there, and we've breached 7 of the climate tipping points that we have. The fossil fuel industry wants us to give up, right? They want to just keep selling oil and coal and plastic and all that stuff. And we can't afford to, right? It is just too bad to do this. So we have to keep trying, but please don't listen to people and saying we can't do this, because we actually can. I can't convince you of that, but the more you read about this stuff, it is actually possible. There's a lot of scientists out there who are saying it's hard, and it's going to be really difficult. But I come back to this chart, right? And you guys, as a bipartisan organization focused on voting, you know how important this is. Social change takes a really long time, and it's really, really difficult, and it's frustrating. I've only been at a few years, and you guys have been a lot longer. But it takes a long time with not much seems to happen. So we got to the 18th and 19th Amendment. We got Roe versus Wade in there. Now I need to get my chart because now that isn't there. Same-sex marriage, things like that. It takes a long time, and then it suddenly happens. I love the fact that the papers are full of climate problems, not because there's climate problems, but because people are actually talking about it right now. So keep doing what you're doing. The people involved at climate protests up until this is only 2019, but rising number of people, and you see it all over the place. The numbers are rising even more. What can you do? On your own, you can have a very little world that you interact with. When you get bigger, you can learn and donate. You can do social networks. You can organize. You can be public. And then once we get to these systems, we make a bigger effect. So if you change your lifestyle, that's really, really good. So thank you. Thank us everybody for what they do. It's really, really great. If we can change the system is where the magic's really going to happen. And you do that by advocacy. And you guys know this because you do it all the time. So thank you for that. So with your voice, as you know, you can make a real big difference as a citizen. Most people, right? You're the exceptions to the rule, but most people feel powerless and they just say, "Oh, politics is going to happen," and it happens, and I can't do anything about it. So they just walk away. If you find an organization that's committed to helping you to reduce that powerlessness and makes that difference, that's the place you want to be. And I think you're in one. You can be in more than one, as I know a lot of you are. You could all join CCL. I would love that too. So find one that builds chapters, provides training, makes key asks of elected officials, and encourages you to be audacious and do things that you didn't think you could ever do. You all do that every day, but please keep doing it. When you do those things, you're going to do more than you ever thought was possible, and I'm sure you all feel that right now. And that's when you're going to be a community leader, which you all are. And you're going to feel really good about what you did to help the world. So thank you. CCL itself, right, focuses on personal conviction, so people doing it. It's all volunteer, very few staff. We do education, so a lot of information. The staff provide the information to allow the volunteer to be successful. We have a roadmap to what we need to do to get good climate policy out there. We push for climate action. We push for carbon fee and dividend, but we also push for other things that are out there that make sense. And we have chapters, about 500 around the US, and we have international chapters. The links here, if you go to cclusa.org, they'll give you actions every month to do. You can talk to me. I think my email's here, and if not, I'm happy to share it. En-ROAD you can get from climateinteractive.org. I will again paste the scenario that we found. Probable futures of.org, I didn't show you anything of that today, but they look at the number of weather variables. It basically says we're going to struggle with wildfires across the whole country in a 2.5 degrees C world, which is very scary. So if you want more, right, you can learn it yourself. All the training, there's actually videos online. You can learn all the details. You can reach out to me. I'm more than happy to do any of the presentations like this. We also have 13 climate scholars at UD that have been trained in En-ROADS. So particularly if you had a younger group, we find it's more effective rather than having me as an old guy trying to tell kids what to do. We have the kids, and they do it very differently than me. Believe me, I just stand amazed at how the students actually interact with younger students. And we're looking for more ways to engage. So in communities, in schools, in churches, yes, you can have my email. And I think, Jeanette, it was you that said you were in Maryland. So I know people in Maryland who are ambassadors, and I'd be happy to talk to any group that you have if you wanted me to do that. I'll put my email. So that is it. Thank you. I'll take any questions. Go on.
Phil, this has been really, really interesting. This is about the 5th time I've heard a presentation, but I learned something new every time, and it's such an exciting tool, terribly interesting. And as I sat here, I really wanted lawmakers to see this, and I wanted our DENREC folks to see it, because we're putting so much emphasis on rather expensive subsidies, and I'm not sure it's a good payoff for us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you kind of have to do them all, right? And so it's one of those, if you focus on one at the exclusion of other things, you still don't get there, right? You have to do a bit of everything. But I think that's why we don't subsidize things as high as we could do. We don't tax things as far as we could do, because we're trying to do that. But the challenge is getting it to be bipartisan, right? You've lived the opposition that you get from doing some of these things. You get a whole lot of people that love them, and you get a whole lot of people that hate them. And finding bipartisan solutions. One of the things CCL right now is pushing for permitting reform, and there's a bill in Congress, and there's probably nobody that likes it. But some people like some things, some people like other things, right? But there's nobody that likes everything in that bill. But getting the bill through Congress is the most important thing that we can do, because getting all that renewable energy to the people that need the energy is what's really important. We don't have enough transmission and things like that. So CCL supporting the permitting reform. Some of the other environmental groups are actually saying, no, we don't. Right? I think Sierra Club came out against it. Bill McKibben came out against it. But we're trying to have this conversation and say, you may not like everything that's in there because there's some things for fossil fuel that are in there. But what we're trying to do is flood the world with renewable energy rather than that basically makes fossil fuels go away because it's more expensive.
Letty has her hand up.
I wanted to find out when you spoke to showed the DNREC people, what was their response? So what did they how did they take the information? I don't know when you did it, but it'd be interesting to know.
We've not done a specific. They've been in the audience when we've done things. I don't know as I've specifically talked to a DNREC group on their own.
Oh, okay.
And I think, when they're in public, they're very cautious about what they would say.
That's right.
But I don't know. They're very aware of it. I think they know what needs to be done, and they know how to do it. But they're in this how to navigate the bipartisanship that's needed in order to get things passed.
Bill, did you see the chat post by Ely, who said they just played with biogas? Do you want to respond to
I don't
that?
know the answer. So one of the things, Peggy, you say you've seen it multiple times and you learn every time. I've done it multiple times and I learn every time. There's so much in this presentation, you can't possibly know everything. What I would say, I'm just trying to do this on my own, bioenergy. I don't know, I'm not gonna be able to find it right now. There's probably, if you go to Climate Interactive, or if you actually go to the model, and if you go into help and En-ROADS training, so it's under the help menu, there's En-ROADS training, and it will take you to the training page on Climate Interactive, and there's probably a video about biogas. I would suggest watching that, and they're usually by Andrew Jones, who's their director, and he's a very engaging speaker who is great. If you don't get the answer, if you email me, I can find out for you, and I can have a look at it, but I know we're running out of time. Sorry, Ely. Any other questions?
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating hour and a half, Phil, and we're just terribly grateful to you. Thanks very much. And I think you've all kind of made us mini ambassadors, and we want to support what you've been doing. So if you think of something that we can do to support your work, let us know.
Getting voters out is really, really important. So what you're doing to get voters out and getting voters to choose candidates who support environmental, right? So getting the questions out there to basically ask environmental questions at town halls, ask environmental questions of candidates wherever they are, and make sure that we get a clear choice of people choosing environmentally minded candidates. And
Yeah,
there's a lot of these things that people probably do. People are on both sides care. They just get into a very political world where they're not allowed to care. So I think the more we talk about it, the better we're going to be.
well, you're a great ambassador for the ambassadors. So thank
I
you
really
very much.
appreciate this. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for all you do on climate and voting. And say, I'm happy to do anything. I'm happy to come back and go in deeper dive or whatever you want to do.
Thank you very much.